Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom has released to critical and commercial success. Being the follow-up to Breath of the Wild is no easy feat, but it seems like the developers rose to the occasion and created a fantastic sequel to one of the most beloved games of the generation. However, there are many of us who still haven't gotten around to picking up the game just yet. Whether that's due to a busy life schedule, an already full backlog of games, or that $70 price tag, I believe that there are other games that you can play to pass the time until you've either saved up enough money for Tears of the Kingdom, or just to play instead of Tears of the Kingdom for a while, if you'd rather wait until the hype dies down a bit. And trust me, I know that right now, we all want that shiny new toy, in this case a small black piece of plastic, but sometimes it's just not worth it to drop the cash equivalent of 2 weeks worth of groceries on a new video game, just to satisfy that shopaholic urge and avoid the FOMO. And a quick disclaimer, not all of the games that I'll be talking about today are available on Nintendo Switch, but most of them are. But for the ones that aren't, they're available on a wide variety of platforms and have been out for a few years at this point, so you can usually find them at a good price. And without any further ado, let's get to it. Here are my top 10 games to play instead of The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I know, this one is kind of cheating, but some of us still haven't beaten Breath of the Wild, and if that's you, then please do yourself a favor and play Breath of the Wild for a little bit before buying Tears of the Kingdom. You will not regret it, I promise you. Breath of the Wild is still considered the greatest game of all time by a large number of people, and while it's not the shiny new toy, it is the not shiny older toy that may actually still be better, maybe. A lot of people bought Elden Ring, probably you included. Yeah, you're not that special. It's a lot like Zelda too. It has a voiceless protagonist, it's light on the cutscenes and dialogue, sort of vague but sort of simple storyline, and there's a lot of different ways to approach challenges and customize your own playstyle. It is a ton of fun but also extremely challenging, just like Zelda. It's also one of the more immersive games I think I've ever played. You can really get lost in this dense open world, and I think Elden Ring really shines when you forget about the guides, forget about the maps and the exploits and stuff like that, and really just let yourself get lost exploring this amazing open world. And that's something Elden Ring and Breath of the Wild at least have in common. What is there left to say about Skyrim that hasn't already been said by countless others? It is a legendary game, one that you've probably already played and beaten. But it can always be worth another playthrough, whether that's to experience the epic story again, get immersed in the dense open world, or play around with some mods, it's all well worth your time. It's a fantastic game, and it still holds up well alongside modern AAA releases, and it is one of the most bang-for-your-buck games ever made. I'd say the similarities to Zelda include the open world, the freedom of choice and playstyle, the fantasy aesthetic, and the voiceless protagonist. Very reminiscent of the classic Zelda games, Tunic is a jaw-droppingly gorgeous indie gem released in 2022. Its beautiful art style and punishing yet rewarding gameplay has earned it many fans, and it's obvious to see the impact that this game has had on the indie landscape. It can be easy to get lost in this world full of fun power-ups, interesting enemies, and that Souls-like style of gameplay that keeps you coming back for more, no matter how difficult the challenge. Now, the oldest title on this list, Okami, originally released in 2006, is an action-adventure game in a similar vein to The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, or maybe even Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. While the main game and story is linear, there are quite a few side quests and optional activities to sink your teeth into. And you definitely won't mind any extra minutes spent inside this world because it still looks amazing. Even back on the PS2 and the Wii, this game looked good, but there is a more recent Switch port that goes on sale on the eShop quite often. If you haven't played Okami, you're definitely going to want to change that. Look for Okami HD on the eShop for around $10 if the sale ever pops up. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is recognized by most as one of the greatest open-world games out there. It's a third-person action-adventure similar to Breath of the Wild, but with an obviously more mature and darker tone. It's packed absolutely full of quests, weapons, magic, and other equipment to find. It originally released in 2015 for the PS4, Xbox One, and PC, but there is actually a Switch port as well. It's shocking to see this game running on the Switch, given the size and scope of the game, as well as the graphical fidelity. And while it's not at its prettiest on the Switch, the console still gets the job done, I think, making for a wonderful open-world experience that most people wouldn't think to play on Nintendo's hybrid system. I'll be honest, with this next one, this is one I have a huge soft spot for. Elix is a game by Piranha Bytes, who've made games like Gothic 3 and Risen. Elix departs from the fantasy aspect of those games in favor of a science fiction post-apocalyptic setting, and honestly it feels like a breath of fresh air. There are multiple factions you can join, and each one has unique armor, weapons, abilities, and missions to complete. There's a lot of different ways to play, and that's probably the biggest similarity from Elix to Tears of the Kingdom / Breath of the Wild. Next on the list is what some consider to be a hidden gem. Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen didn't make much of a splash when it was originally released on the PS3 and Xbox 360. However, it's experienced a rebirth on the Nintendo Switch, and while I can't speak much for that port, I can tell you that Dragon's Dogma is an extremely satisfying, open-world action RPG. It's probably most comparable to Skyrim meets Gothic 3, but with its own unique gameplay, especially combat mechanics. It's one of the more unique open-world experiences, and one that many may have not gotten a chance to play yet. Another indie game for the list, The Pathless, was developed by the same team that created Abzu, a huge indie success from 2016. The Pathless shares a lot of similarities with Breath of the Wild, boasting a beautifully designed world, really fun bow and arrow shooting mechanics, and some interesting ideas including the obelisks, which players need to return light to, and the lack of a mini-map in favor of spirit vision mechanic. While not quite well received as Abzu, I believe the developers have created something worthwhile with The Pathless, and if you can find it on sale, it is well worth your time. And finally for our list, yet another indie game from 2016, Hyperlight Drifter was a huge success story. An incredible game with similar gameplay and visuals to The Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past, and other games of that era. It's even described by its developer as a mix between A Link to the Past and the Diablo series. It's a top-down 2D pixel art action RPG with really fast-paced combat and lots of weapons and abilities to unlock. It is one of the smoothest looking and smoothest feeling games I've ever seen, and while it may be a far cry from Tears of the Kingdom's scope and scale, it makes up for that by creating a beautiful and satisfying experience that you will find very hard to put down. So there you have it. Those are my top 10 games to play before getting The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Like I said earlier, not all of us have $70 to drop on a new video game, so hopefully this helps you find something that's either cheaper, on sale, or already in your library that you can play to pass the time until you decide if you want to get Tears of the Kingdom or not. And I would love to hear your recommendations as well. Please comment with your thoughts and opinions, and thank you so much for watching.